Kesah Princely photo. Mr. Kesah Princely photo.
Yes, Professor.
No, it's not yet. Present.
Present, Professor.
An example. Mr. Kesah Princely photo.
Present, Professor.
Present, Mr. Chair.
Present, Mr. Chair.
Distinguished we need to examine the thesis of Mr. Kesah Princely. Which has as title Accessing Mass Media Conflict During Conflict, Needs and Challenges of Persons with Visual Impairment in the Cameroon Anglophone Conflict. This panel has really been established to examine the thesis and the objective of this examination is one, to vet the scientific quality of the work, and two, to enable the candidate to show ownership of the substance of the work. This jury has that one was task. The examination is carried on by the jury. The audience is advised to stay quiet during the conversation between the candidate and the jury. You don't want any remarks, no show of disapproval or approval. In short, those of us who are lawyers, we know it's like a court process, court proceeding. And the chair has the sovereign right to dismiss the audience and examine the candidate in camera. That said, I would want to seize this opportunity to congratulate the candidate for having gotten to the stage. I want to specifically say that Mr. Kesah Princely is a visually impaired candidate whom we groomed here. I don't want to give pre-remarks to difference in jury or the panel. He's a very humble person, very conscientious, very industrious, very intelligent. I've met him on several occasions within different fora. I've read some of his papers. I'm very impressed with his scientific worth, depth. As I said, I'm not influencing the panel, but I want to make it clear because this is a particular situation, a special situation where we're having a candidate in the Faculty of Laws and Professor, the first candidate. With a physical challenge, specifically visually impaired, who has gotten to this level, and the second in the University of Buea. I think it's something that we comment and congratulate ourselves as a faculty alongside candidate. That said, I Mr. Kesah, we want to see whether that intelligence transcends beyond yes, by knowledge of him and pre-knowledge of him as an individual. So Mr. Kesah, you have the yam and the knife to give to all their work. Before we get into the substance, I want to acknowledge the various members of the panel and permit me to start with the external examiner, Professor Fred Jeremy Medu from the University of Buea. It's not his first time, he's coming over on our invitation to help us go through this exercise for other candidates. So you are welcome, and we are very happy that each time we send reports, you without hesitation respond positively. Thank you for coming. I would want to stretch to my immediate left, Professor Bangma, Head of Department, Political Science and Comparative Politics. The department where this is lodged, and of course I need not say much about Professor Bangma. He's the head of the department and has groomed so many students, have decided so many of his panels as well. And of course, the pleasure that today we are seeing in another capacity, not as supervisor, but as a member on this panel. Prof, you're welcome. To my far right, I will have introduced him last because he's the youngest on the panel, but the role he plays overturns that youngness that he's representing Professor Kevin James, who is the general reviewer and has been hit. Yes, he's been. Yes. Yes, hello. Oh, sorry, it is Prof. Kevin, who is your head of the department, sorry. International relations, not very important. Sorry. Prof. Kevin just had an unfortunate situation, he lost the father yesterday, so he was rushed to the army for the preliminaries. So our hearts go with him in this program. Dr. Mbiatem will be presenting on this panel. Dr. Mbiatem is the lecturer in the Department of International Relations and Resolution, and so their son. So it's great to present. You're welcome. That's the prayer. Professor Defu is the supervisor, the main supervisor, expert in public administration, and he goes across many departments. I think about 2 or 3 departments: public law, public administration, political science, international relations, conflict resolution. So he has a very wide spectrum, and I'm happy to have you in this panel that I can share. You're welcome. I want to last give also a name as the list. We just change his stamp, his academic stamp. 1 month ago it was DR, doctor, but today is PR. In a few weeks, it's no longer Dr. Emil, it's now Professor Emil Sunjo. And this is his first baptism in this new parish of an associate professor. And we are still looking for the parish where we post him. So if he's very humble, we maintain him in the lucrative parish, If he's haughty, we send him to the bush parish, where even a bike will not, help him to access his parish. Emil, you're welcome, and of course, it's your candidate. So we're going to see what you have prepared together with the candidate. The student is going to work. The mission was to point the way, to show the candidate the way, and his obligation or his duty is to walk the way. We're going to assess how far he went in that journey. Mr. Kesah, the new regulations state that you have 40 minutes to go for presentation, that is the synopsis of the book. 40 minutes. But each time I decide a panel, I tell the candidate 40 minutes, we have prepared and asked questions. And if you open more gaps, you will hit hard. Because our role is not to cajole you. Our work is to, our job here is to handle it, to grill you as much as possible. Grill you until no oil can come out, squeeze you, and you speak like an orange. Before you leave here, you must be tired, you feel tired and thirsty. Because to end that title, doctor, it's not a small exam. That's why you find all these men of substance, some coming from far, come and get this work. It is not to frighten you, okay?
Yes,
I know your worth. I know your worth. We just want to show you, we just want to see you express that love. It's a singular opportunity, but we know that except you decide when you want to fail, and then we call you back here after 1 year. So we do the same exercise. We don't pay for it. On that note, the time now is exactly 1 o'clock. At 1:40, if you are using the upper limit, you should stop. You don't have water.
I do, Professor. I don't share.
Put your, don't behave like the last, you didn't back in the
I was just.
your cup under your feet. No,
I was just afraid that I'm sitting to a heavy when I'm sitting.
no, give him a small bottle. Please, give him a small bottle. That thing is a job. It's increase your convenience. Yeah. So you can see, and then you start.
Thank you very much, Chair. The chairperson of the jury, distinguished academics of the panel, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kesah Princely, and I'm here to present a thesis titled Accessing Mass Media During Conflict, Needs and Challenges of Persons with Visual Impairment in the Cameroon Anglophone Conflict. The thesis was done in 5 chapters. Chapter 1 was general introduction. Chapter 2, review of literature. The next chapter was methodology. The last but one was presentation of results and discussion, and then summary, conclusion, and recommendations. Background to the study: mass media. The influence of mass media, such as conventional and social media, has grown exponentially over time. This is largely due to advancement in technology. Today, a lot of people depend on information curated from various media platforms to make rational decisions. In fact, mass media have been very pivotal, including in framing issues of disabilities, even during armed conflict. The conflict in the northwest and southwest region of Cameroon has mostly been executed using social media propaganda. Next slide, please. The prevalence of visual impairment in Cameroon has unfortunately largely been documented. Human Rights Watch 2022, however, estimates that there are about 600,000 persons with vision impairment in Cameroon. Of this number, 150,000 cannot read with their eyes. In the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, 1%, that is 35,000 people, are completely blind, while a further 2%, that is 70,000, are living with a significant vision impairment. Next slide, please. The Anglophone conflict in Cameroon is deeply rooted in socio-political and economic grievances, and this started with the lawyers and teachers protests and later escalated into an armed conflict, causing violence, displacement, and this displacement and violence add additional layer of challenges to persons with vision impairment. In the context of the conflict, the mass media have been very pivotal in reporting about the conflict, and civilians, including persons with vision impairment, get information from mass media to then know how to go about their movements. Statement of the problem. According to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities 2006, access to information is a human right, and state parties are strongly encouraged to ensure that disabled people have information, including in times of armed conflict and disaster. In the course of the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon, however, persons with visual impairment still sweat to have information in order to make decisions about their daily activities. Because of the lack of information, some of them have found themselves in hotspots and ended up being kidnapped, while others have even been killed, like in Fundong, northwest region of Cameroon. In fact, the media has not only not adequately presented information in accessible format, but the media too hardly report issues pertaining to the challenges or plights of persons with visual impairment amidst the Anglophone conflict. This has left many of them to now depend on oral stories spread within the community of persons with visual impairment to access information. Despite the proliferation of global or assistive technology globally, it therefore remains a serious puzzle as to why persons with visual impairment in Anglophone Cameroon still cannot access information about the state of the conflict. Next slide, please. Research questions. The research questions were divided into a main and 3 specific research questions. Main research question: what are the needs and challenges of persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media during the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon? Specific research questions. 1. What mass media options exist for persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media during the Anglophone conflict? 2. What are the challenges faced by persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media during the Anglophone conflict? And 3. How effective are measures that have been adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment during the Anglophone conflict? Research objectives. Main research objective: to examine the needs and challenges of persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media during the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon. Specific research objectives: 1. To identify mass media options available for persons with visual impairment during the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon. 2. To examine the challenges faced by persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media during the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon. And 3. To evaluate measures that have been adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment in Anglophone Cameroon. Research assumptions. 1. Limited media options have been adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment in Anglophone Cameroon. 2. Persons with visual impairment face significant challenges accessing mass media during the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon. And 3. Limited measures have been adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment in Anglophone Cameroon. Scope of the study. The study was delimited to the various types of mass media that have been used to report on the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon. But more importantly, how meaningful such mass media have been able to address the needs of persons with visual impairment. The study's time scope spanned from 2016 to 2025. 2016 was chosen on grounds that it marked the beginning of the Anglophone conflict, which emanated or stemmed from the long-neglected Anglophone conflict, which started with the lawyers and teachers protests and later degenerated into an armed conflict in 2017. Since then, the need to have adequate information from mass media have become so important, and so making the researcher to look at how important it is for persons with visual impairment to access mass media during the Anglophone conflict. 2025 was chosen because it marked the end of the research process, which concluded with analysis of the data and submission of the thesis for defense. Talking about the geographical scope of the study was delimited to the Northwest and Southwest regions, and specifically Mezam and Fako divisions. Mezam and Fako were chosen for 3 reasons. The first reason was because Mezam and Fako host more persons with visual impairment, and a lot of them have even been displaced from more remote divisions. The 2 divisions were also more accessible to the researcher, who himself is a person with visual impairment. Also, there are more media outlets present in Mezam and Fako, and so it became possible for the researcher to look at how mass media have been documenting the Anglophone conflict and how such information is accessible to persons with visual impairment. Mr. Chair, just before I move to justification of the study, the image you find on the screen shows how active the researcher was in the research processes, and so it was important to limit the study to Mezam and Fako because they were relatively secured, and so he needed to be safe first before he could access and collect data for the study. Justification of the study. The study is justified first because access to mass media is a human right. According to the 2006 UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, state parties must ensure that information is accessible to persons with visual impairment, including in times of armed conflict and in times of disasters. In fact, the convention is corroborated by the 2010 National Law on the Protection and Promotion of Persons with Disabilities, which calls on media practitioners to ensure that disabled people have information accessible in the, or compatible with the format of their impairment. Mr. Chair, the study is also justified on grounds that it actually looked at the available mass media options, challenges visual impaired persons face, but more importantly, measures to improve access to mass media. Next slide, please. Significance of the study. The study is significant for several reasons. First, it informs governmental and also organizational policy geared toward promoting access to mass media for persons with visual impairment, especially in times of conflict. The study's findings will equally be important because they would stimulate support activities from civil society organizations and international institutions. The study would broaden the knowledge, the know-how of persons with visual impairment on how to be able to access more mass media given the proliferation of assistive technologies. The study's findings will also inspire more research on the subject of assistive technology, mass media and conflict, especially in the situation of persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media. Next slide, please. The next slide is on the definition of key terms. The first key term is mass media. Mass media in the context of the study was seen as any medium that is used to disseminate information on a large scale without discrimination. Such includes conventional media like radio and television and social media like Facebook. Now, Mr. Chair, social media featured here as one of the key terms because the Anglophone conflict has mostly been executed using social media propaganda. And so the study saw social media as any internet-based platforms that allow users to generate, to share and interact with digital content such as text, images, video, and audio. The next is on persons with disabilities. The study saw persons with disabilities as people with a long-term physical, mental, sensory or intellectual impairment, which in interacting with barriers hinder them from effectively interacting on an equal basis with other people without disabilities. Disability in the context of the study is a broader term that includes visual impairment. Visual impairment in the context of the study was seen as persons who have either complete blindness or who are partially sighted and whose visual acuity cannot be corrected using corrective medications, lenses or glasses. The Anglophone conflict. The Anglophone conflict was seen as a socio-political upheaval ongoing in the country's northwest and southwest regions since 2016. It started with the lawyers and teachers protests and later engulfed other sectors of the society. Review of literature and theoretical framework. This section of the study was divided into 4 main parts: conceptual review, review of empirical literature, theoretical framework, and literature gap. The concepts reviewed included mass media, visual impairment conflict, and the Anglophone conflict, into 3 broad categories. We have assistive technologies needed by persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media. We had challenges faced by persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media, and the inclusivity of mass media content toward addressing the needs of persons with visual impairment during conflict. Now, the theories touched were 2 theories and 2 Afrocentric models: the theory of social responsibility, the theory of change, Kawaida philosophy, and orality, and the power of normal. Literature review from conceptual review mass media shows that over the years, thousands of articles have documented the various platforms that are used to disseminate information on a large scale simultaneously without any discrimination. Talking about visual impairment, the terminology has been evolving, Mr. Chair, and the European Blind Union advises that it is good to always include visual impaired, persons with visual impairment, blind and partially sighted, so that nobody should be left out. Those who are completely blind depend on what they call audible tactile, while those who are partially sighted depend on residual sight. And conflict. There is no universal acceptable definition of conflict, as we saw in our conceptual review, but we notice that conflicts are either malignant, that is destructive, or benign, that is constructive. And we also saw that conflict is a process that has to do with differences, disagreement, and diversion of goals. The Anglophone conflict. First of all, the study saw an Anglophone as somebody whose ancestral origin are traced to the northwest and southwest region of Cameroon, and not somebody who can express in English, as some people have always said. We also had this Anglophone conflict itself, which emanated from the long-standing neglected Anglophone problems of historians like traced to the failure of the condominium in 1916. Others look at it to be the neglect of the clauses from the Fumban Constitutional Conference in 1961, while others think that the 1972 referendum was actually a step toward causing the Anglophone conflict. Others, however, feel that the icing of the cake was the 1984 change of the country's nomenclature from United Republic of Cameroon in 1992, which was previously Federal Republic of Cameroon in 1961, to Republic of Cameroon. The name French Cameroon had gained independence from France on January 1, 1960. And so in 2016, neglected lawyers and teachers protests, separate protests of course, later sparked tensions that escalated in 2017, causing what has been now known as the Anglophone conflict, Ambazonian War of Independence, and a lot of other nomenclatures recorded in the study. The next is on the literature, that's review of literature, assistive technologies. A lot of persons with visual impairment in Africa in particular do not have skills on how to use assistive technologies, and this is very important and impactful in accessing mass media, especially during conflict. On challenges faced in accessing mass media, we found out that often when populations are fleeing, persons with disabilities are not able to access safety-related information. Consequently, they are abandoned behind and they end up dying. Those who manage to flee, some host community members are usually hostile, causing them to remain in isolation. Inclusivity of mass media. We noticed in the review of literature that a lot of studies have documented how journalists face difficulties putting information in accessible format, such as alternative text and also labeling audios or adding audio sounds on videos that do not have descriptive sound. Talking about the theoretical framework, Mr. Chair, we used the social responsibility theory that was propounded by Siebert, Peterson, and Schramm in 1956 in their book titled Fourth Theory of Media. The theory has as assumptions that mass media practitioners should ensure that they provide information that is accessible, that is accurate, that is fair and balanced. The theory is related in the study because it helped the research or the researcher to be able to understand how persons with visual impairment access especially print media, but more importantly, to see how journalists have used corporate social responsibility, because they need to be socially corporate, and the theory's tenet makes that very clear. The next theory was the theory of change that was propounded. In fact, the theory has been evolving for over 200 years, and is linked to authors such as Auguste Comte, the likes of Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx. The theory, however, Mr. Chair, in the context of our research, we borrowed from Humanity of Inclusion, that's Handicap International, which looked at change from the angle of universal design. How are products designed to suit the needs of everybody? There is no single cut to everything. And so the theory recognizes that disability is not homogeneous. Persons with disabilities have diverse needs, including those with visual impairment. How have the media been able to now factor in this uniqueness in their reports? That's what we were looking at. And talking about Kawaida philosophy by Karanga, 1965-1966, the theory actually builds on the model, I bet to say, actually builds on principles such as collective responsibility. The theory actually builds on self-determination. It developed during the period of black cultural and political emancipation in the US. Mr. Chair, talking about collective responsibility, it is about knowing that Africa, being a communal society, the difficulties of persons with visual impairment accessing mass media is not the problem of these people themselves, it's a societal issue. That's why the United Nations looks at disability to be physical barriers. And so it takes the community to be able to get rid of those barriers, but also self-determination. Persons with visual impairment must strive to make sure that they learn how to use assistive technology so that they can access mass media from a plethora of sources. The last one was actually Orality and the Power of Normal by Asante in the 1960s. This theory actually builds on the power of the spoken word, the power of orality. In fact, in African rhetorics and epistemology, it is argued that it is not that Africans are illiterate, it is rather that Africans communicate orally, and this is how they have documented their history, their identity, their origin, since their existence. And so we were looking at this theory, how persons with vision impairment, how mass media could tap from the radio, which is a blind medium, especially community radios, how they can be used to report updates, programs that would enable persons with visual impairment access mass media. Literature gap. In reviewing literature for the study, we had both principles, knowledge, and gaps. Mr. Chair, access to mass media is a human right. During armed conflict, the situation of persons with visual impairment get exacerbated. In reviewing literature for this study, we noticed that a lot of studies focus more on persons with disabilities in general, and very little was seen pertaining to the needs of persons with visual impairment. We also noticed, Mr. Chair, that little has been done theorizing mass media access of blind people in the context of Afrocentrism. That's why Kawaida philosophy and the power, and orality and the power of normal were very important in the study. Finally, about the literature that, Mr. Chair, we noticed that in the context of the Anglophone conflict, nothing has been done to actually document the experiences of persons with visual impairment accessing mass media. I'm talking about, or we are talking here about published literature, not gray literature. I mean, well-researched academic literature. We do not see that. And the research then is focused on filling this lacuna methodology. The research made use of a qualitative research design and cross-sectional, qualitative research approach using a cross-sectional design. Now, the research made use of Afrocentric paradigm, building on African empathetic attitude toward disability. Afrocentrism, in the context of the study, was seen in the Mazama 2003 criteria for Afrocentrism, which include that not all knowledge is measurable, oral stories are important, and African knowledge is very paramount. Overview. The research made use of both primary and secondary data. Primary data were gotten from interviews with persons with visual impairment and media practitioners in the Northwest and Southwest regions, while secondary data were gotten from online journal articles and published reports. The research made there was a pilot phase for this research that happened in April 2024 with 3 participants, 2 visually impaired persons and 1 journalist. Mr. Chair, initially the researcher was hoping to do focus group discussion for leaders of persons with visual impairment and interviews for ordinary persons with visual impairment. But from the pilot study, we realized that having focus group discussion with the leaders would not yield any detailed outcome. Consequently, we decided to stick to interviews. Next slide, please. Population of the study. The population of the study was drawn from persons with visual impairment and journalists. A total of 20 persons with visual impairment were interviewed, 10 from the Northwest, that is Mezam, 10 from FACO, and 11 media practitioners, 6 from Mezam division, including 5 managers of both digital and broadcast media organs, and then 5 in FACO division, including 1 manager of a radio station, and other print journalists, newspaper, and digital. Mr. Chair, talking about the sampling techniques, the research made use of purposive sampling and snowball sampling. Purposively, the researcher used, he's been a blind person for over 25 years, and also being a leader of persons with disabilities from the Northwest and Southwest region of Cameroon, to purposively select people who would be apt, who would be sound to provide, potential participants who will be apt enough to provide data for the study. And also same for the journalist selected. The researcher has been a practicing journalist for nearly 10 years, a multimedia journalist with both online media, broadcast, and even print, that is newspaper. So he used his experience to also select journalists who would have the know-how, who have the skills to provide relevant data for the study. Next slide, please. Interviews. The researcher developed 2 semi-structured interview guides that were used to collect data. Both guides had about 25 questions each that was divided into 5 sections. One was used for journalists, and the other one was used for persons with vision impairment. Next slide, please. Use of immersion, reflexivity, and bracketing. Immersion is a qualitative research technique in which the researcher becomes part of the group being researched. The researcher had to immerse himself in the study in order to better understand the challenges faced by persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media. Immersion was inspired by 3 reasons. 1, the researcher has been legally blind for over 25 years, and so he has first-hand understanding of what it takes to access information in a conflict-hit area. Secondly, the researcher has about 10 years of experience as a journalist, and so he had to immerse himself to understand how journalists should put information, but also what it takes for persons with visual impairment to receive such information. The researcher has lived in the Northwest and Southwest regions of Cameroon ever since the inception of the Anglophone conflict in 2016. So this gave him a good grounding to be able to immerse himself in the study. Reflexivity and bracketing, in order to sift out his own biases, preconceived notions, from overshadowing, from diluting the research findings. The researcher constantly reflected on the various research steps, speaking with his fathers, his supervisors, but also reading wide on how other people have used reflexivity and bracketing elsewhere. Next slide, please. Talking about analysis, the researcher actually used Polezi's 1978 7 steps of data analysis to analyze data for the research. Next slide. Talking about ethical considerations, the researcher adhered to academic conduct in research. First of all, making sure that consent was sought from potential participants, both verbally through phone calls, but also written through WhatsApp messages and SMS. The researcher also ensured that the identity of participants was concealed by allocating unique identifiers. For example, for media practitioners, labeled P01 to P011, and for MP01, MP011, and for persons with visual impairment, PVI01 to PVI20. The researcher also made sure that he did not spend time discussing side taking, the side supported by persons with visual impairment or journalists in the Anglophone conflict. He focused solely on collecting data, but also staying apolitical and respecting the deontology of data collection. We now move to the key findings. Mr. Chair, this is the lifeblood of the study. Mr. Chair, for your comfort and for that of your panelists, permit the researcher to recapitulate the three main pillars on which the study was anchored. We had mass media options available for persons with visual impairment, challenges faced by persons with visual impairment, and also measures that have been adopted to improve access to mass media. Talking about the access to mass media options, persons with visual impairment mostly have TV sets, radio sets, some have smartphones and computers that they use to access both print or both conventional and digital media. Mr. Chair, we noticed a paradigm in the study. There has been a paradigm shift from access to information. Before now, a lot of people, including even a researcher, thought that persons with visual impairment were relying on radio for information. We noticed that with the advent of technology, persons with visual impairment have also been evolving. A lot of them also now using social media to access information about the conflict, which is mostly executed, of course, using social media propaganda. Although a lot of them have funny experiences, not being able to access images, videos without audio, sounds, and so on, but they are online, showing that they move with the trends. Mr. Chair, talking about enhancing accessibility, we found out that some journalists, especially those who have been relating with journalists with visual impairment and also leaders of persons with visual impairment, have been trying to answer the basic questions of what happened where with who, why and when, even in TV reports, so that persons with visual impairment can follow. Because TV reports rely heavily on visuals, but they do that so that at least they can access information. Mr. Chair, talking about challenges faced by persons with visual impairment in accessing mass media, we noticed that persons with visual impairment face difficulties accessing assistive technologies. A lot of them do not know how to use assistive technologies, but also the cost. Some of them also have given up, thinking that because they are visually impaired, cannot use assistive technologies. But more importantly, journalists face difficulties pacifying information in accessible format, making it difficult for even those who manage to acquire assistive technology not to be able to access media services. Mr. Chair, we also notice as a challenge that some visually impaired persons continue to face difficulties with the cost of getting assistive technologies. Yes, assistive technologies they are growing rapidly world over, but they are very expensive, especially in the global south and particularly in Anglophone Cameroon. A lot of them said they are not able to access such technologies. Mr. Chair, talking about measures that have been adopted to improve access to, or before even that, we also have issues like awareness. Some journalists have that initiative to be able to produce content and air content geared toward promoting disability inclusion, especially accessing mass media during conflict. But editors and media controllers do not see how this will generate them income, forgetting about corporate social responsibility. Mr. Chair, talking about measures that have been adopted, we have the first one is oral information. Persons with visual impairment, because they have not been having access to information, have decided to start spreading information orally, especially those experiences happening within them. For example, the rate on Sajoka. Sajoka means St. Joseph Children and Adult Home, a rehab center in Mambu, Bafut, about 12 kilometers from the city of Bamenda. Government forces actually raided Sajoka, and this information was circulated widely within the community of the blind. Such stories usually either bring hope or hopelessness. This was one of the issues of aspects of hopelessness. They were now afraid, asking which center will be attacked next. Another one is the Blue Blind attack or raid. The Blue Blind Center here in my 16 was raided by separatist fighters in 2018, and the blind student was preparing to go to school. The blind student just heard the separatists telling him, "If you shake, I shoot." The students did not know they were talking to him. Consequently, he kept on moving. And then one of them scaled the fence, headed toward him, pointed the gun, hit his head with the gun, and one of them said, "Oh, don't shoot, that's a blind man, a blind man, a blind man, don't shoot a blind man." Mr. Chair, this was a story of hope within the visual impairment community. The last one for this presentation, attack on a drinking spot in Bamenda, where by government forces, where a visual impaired person was among those who were drinking in that palm wine joint and Tamulung, GBHF, Tamulung Junction to be specific. And when they came in, they said, all phones on the table. The visually impaired person put up their mobility cane. And when the soldiers saw that, the mobility cane, they quickly picked it and said, are you blind? He said, yes. What would have been a sad afternoon suddenly became joyous when they instead bought more palm wine and shared, showing an instance of hope. And this story was widely circulated. The other measure, Mr. Chair, is that the Cameroon Baptist Convention has been struggling, together with the Presbyterian Community Rehabilitation Service, to organize trainings on how to train persons with visual impairment on assistive technologies. They have also been training journalists on how to report inclusively. But Mr. Chair, I must admit before you and your panel that such trainings have been very sporadic, leaving more questions than answers as far as the quest to access information is concerned. Mr. Chair, another thing is that journalists have only seen disability inclusive reporting like a novelty. Journalism training, including the University of Buea and University of Bamenda, according to what the journalists said, did not have anything like disability inclusive reporting. So they only met it on the field, and it's a serious challenge. They are always struggling to grapple with the situation. We move next to recommendations for this study. First, to journalists, more training should be organized to harness so they can augment their skills on how to report. To persons with visual impairment, more assistive technology usage trainings should be organized. Social media platforms should encourage the use of alternative text on image and videos without sounds. Government should encourage the enforcement of policy by media practitioners on how to make information accessible. There should be collaboration between media institutions and organizations of persons with visual impairment so that information sharing can be easy. Finally, there should be community engagement. When everybody starts saying the same thing, that information is important, as John S. Beatty says that I am because we are in Africa, that communal spirit will grow and media accessibility will be a thing for everybody, including those with visual impairment. Limitations of the study. Geographical limitations. The scope was limited to measurement factor and generalization might be difficult. Purposive and snowball samplings were used, and this might have limited the representativeness of the data collected. The research process, especially data collection, was impeded by heavy rainfall, insecurity, lack of funding, and this might have affected the depth and breadth of the research. Finally, Mr. Chair, using bracketing was not enough, perhaps, because the researcher made use of immersion, and so bracketing might not have completely sifted out his own preconceived ideas about the conflict and access to mass media for persons with visual impairment. Generally, what was learned? Mr. Chair, or before what was learned, it's important to suggest that oral communication and the use of smartphone would be a fatal area for other researchers to embark on, because oral communication has been used, and rightfully so, by persons with visual impairment to access mass media. Mr. Chair, what was learned, we noticed that there is a shift from the way access to information happens. Persons with visual impairment have left the conventional media and they too are moving online, showing that technology is evolving and persons with visual impairment want to be part of the digital world. Mr. Chair, we noticed that there is high need for more journalists to be trained on how to report inclusively. Finally, the study confirmed my passion, my zeal for Afrocentric, disability-focused, insider-outsider research, and I would like to explore this again in the local context, but also internationally. Mr. Chair, dear Professor, distinguished academics, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your keen attention.
To acknowledge your clarity, Mr. Princely, your eloquence, and ease in your presentation. I think you were really hoping for more time. You used 36 minutes. I think you were hoping for more time. I know you are a talkative too. You talk a lot. See, I was praying that you should stop that. 20 minutes. We were going round and round and round. But it was, at the end, it was a very good presentation. I loved it. It was very informative. And because we opened up, many things have come up. So when you talk to more people sometimes, you may not be very good. It's good, but you cannot, you may not be very good. Before the exercise begins proper with the external examiner, because this is the main man in the panel, I just want to settle. Did I hear you say the researcher has been legally blind for 25 years?
Yes, Professor, for over.
For over. No, my issue is the expression legally blind.
Yes, Professor, having a national disability card.
Is that legally blind? What makes it legal?
Mr. Chair, the disability card actually is an authentic document from the government registering someone with an impairment.
Is your blindness legal? Is your disability legal? Were you supposed to be blind?
Professor, if you personally ask me, I'll say yes.
Why?
Because sometimes, especially given my activities within the disability community, I ask myself if I were sighted, I would have been able to do what I do.
Were you born blind?
It happened when I was very tender, Professor.
What age can you?
No, I think, Professor.
Did you find out? I don't think the expression legally blind is correct. Your blindness is legally recognized. You are not legally blind. When you say legally blind, you are trying to say that it is normal that you are supposed to be blind. That your blindness is normal. Right?
Thank you very much for the correction.
God did not create anybody blind. You are not legally blind. In fact, if we were talking as if we were gossiping someone when we see you passing, we say it's an unfortunate situation. You understand that?
Yes, Chair.
Then we cannot say that it's an unfortunate situation because you are not lesser than any of us seated in this hall. So you are not legally blind. Your blindness is legally recognized so that you can benefit from the protection that arises from this unfortunate situation. Is that clear?
Very clear, Chair.
Yes, I'm talking from a legal perspective. Don't say you are legally blind. Your blindness is legally recognized so that you can benefit from all the protection that the 2006 International Instrument Act, the UN instrument, provides, domesticated in 2010 law. Okay, that was just a point of view. It was something that caressed my mind, my legal mind. I'll hand the floor to Prof, our colleague from Buea, who is the external examiner, and as I said, who has the most objective eye on this panel. Professor Fred.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. It is a privilege for me to take the floor here because every day I speak French. I teach in French. It is a privilege, a very great honor for me here. To have a seat near you, receive the expression of all my admiration and respect. I thank also the authority of the university, the prestigious University of Buea, who allow me to be here. I want also to say thanks, but also my condolences to Professor Kivan. I I say all my admiration to Professor Abama James Are. I'm very honored to share this story with you. It's not the first time. I'm very happy to see you. To say all my expression of admiration and respect. It is the first time in the jury with Dr. Nji. I'm very honored also to be here with my dear colleague. I especially thanks the supervisor, Professor John Defu. I'm very honored to have been associated in this jury with you, by you. It is a privilege to be here. Thanks, Professor. I also thanks the co-supervisor, Professor Emisonjo. It is my third time to sit in the jury with you. It is a great pleasure for me, my dear colleague. Thank you very much for this invitation. And congratulations also. I want also to thank the candidate because its effort and sacrifices allow us to be here. My speech focuses on 4 points: the general observation, strong aspect, weak aspect, the final evaluation statement, and question. I have 2 questions for you. General observation. As we know, the PhD thesis submitted to the Department of International Relations and Conflict Resolution of this university, titled Accessing Mass Media During Conflicts, 2 points. Needs and challenges of persons with visual impairment in Cameroon Anglophone conflicts. This thesis treats a very relevant and original subject that is contemporary. It explores the intersection of disability, media accessibility, and conflict, focusing particularly on the lived experience of visually impaired individuals in the Anglophone region of Cameroon. The Anglophone conflict has created a complex and often chaotic information environment, posing significant challenges for all civilians. In such context, access to timely and accurate information through mass media becomes essential for safety, awareness, and participation in civic life. However, the person with visual impairment already constituting a vulnerable and marginalized group, these challenges are often compounded by both pre-existing accessibility barriers and added difficulties brought on by conflicts. Addressing these issues, this thesis seeks to understand not only the practical barriers faced by visually impaired individuals in accessing mass media during the conflicts, but also their unique needs and perspectives. The study's findings are intended to inform the development of more inclusive media strategy and policy in conflict-prone regions. The thesis contains 233 pages It is organized in a logical sequence with the introduction, the literature review, methodology, findings, and conclusion clearly outlined in 5 chapters. The preliminary pages, reference list, and appendices also complete the major parts of the thesis. Strength points of the thesis. Regarding form, headings are well structured and make the text easy to read and understand. The layout is well designed, the line spacing is correct, and the work is justified and well presented. The insert images and tables are authentic and original. About the content, you can say that the work addresses the difficulties faced by visually impaired people in accessing information during the Anglophone conflict. The hypotheses of these theses are confirmed, as some visually impaired people were forced to flee their homes due to misinformation that suggests an imminent threat to their life. One of the most notable strengths of this thesis is relevance within both academic and practical realms. The intersection of disability, media, and conflict is critically important, yet underexplored area of research, particularly within the context of Cameroon Anglophone regions. By shining a light on the experiences of persons with visual impairment, a demographic frequently excluded from mainstream discussions, the study responds to a significant knowledge gap. The author used field data to support the idea presented in these theses, particularly the need and difficulties encountered by visual impaired people during the Anglophone crisis, and includes some photographs of the data collection process in Bamenda and Buea. By conducting qualitative interview with visually impaired persons, media practitioners, and conflict resolution experts, the thesis captures a broad range of perspectives and experiences. This methodological approach ensures a more holistic and nuanced understanding of the problem. The result obtained corroborate the research question and the initial hypothesis. The author innovates in their theoretical framework by interpreting their data using theory that, until then, had been exclusive to literature and philosophy, which gives their work, at least in part, a certain originality. Beyond the identification and documentation of barriers, the thesis distinguishes itself by offering clear and actionable recommendations. These recommendations are designed to improve media accessibility for persons with visual impairment, both in the short term through adaptation of current major platform and long-term via policy for reform and technological innovation. About weak points of the thesis regarding form, for example, page 4, acknowledgement. You have written Tabi differently. For example, question: why is the name written in capital letters and other not? You have written Tabi in capital letter, but you didn't do it for another names. There is the second thing, there is unreasonable chapter imbalance in the work. Chapter 1, 18 pages. Chapter 2 is 92 pages. Chapter 3 is 25 pages. Chapter 4 is 66 pages, and chapter 5, 9 pages. Why this difference in page, chapter, volume? The author makes typos in the words originality and normal, and spelling and grammar error are noticeable on page 18, 56, etc. It should also be noted that some authors use is in the text are not listed in the bibliography, even though the author present author who, for the most part, were not used in the text. The text should be proofread and the bibliography update. About content, the author would have included a map to define the scope of the study and inserted some images illustrating the Anglophone crisis and the available audiovisual material to demonstrate the difficulties faced by visual impaired people and offer recommendations based on these images. At the conceptual level, the author does not use specific work to clarify, define the concept, nor does he use recent publications to better elucidate the underlying meanings of his work. He does not delve deeply enough into the soft to uncover the heart, and does not operationalize his definition within the context of his study. For each keyword, he provides only a definition without operationalizing it, and then moves on the next. This distracts from the quality of his work. The author offers a thematic and empirical literature review without taking a position. They simply list the main themes of the work without explaining how the work differs from these themes. That is the originality of their work. Its added value or even it contribute to political science. While the focus on the Anglophone region of Cameroon is justified by the specific dynamics of the conflict, it inevitably limits the generalizability of the findings. The experiences and challenges identified may not fully reflect those of persons with visual impairment in other regions of Cameroon, particularly in Francophone areas or in countries facing similar conflict. Further comparative studies will be required to access the broader applicability of the research findings. Due to accessibility and security concerns inherent in conflict settings, the number of participants involved in the research is somewhat restricted. This limitation can affect the representativeness of the data, potentially introducing sampling bias. Final evaluation statement. Overall, the work is well written. It is focused, coherent, and consistent with well-structured chapters and paragraphs that respect the methodological requirements for writing scientific work. Arguments are largely coherent and supported by relevant evidence, showing a very good understanding of the key variables, theory, and concept of the discipline, although the approach is largely normative and prescriptive. The subject matter of the work, visual impairment and access to information in terms of conflict, is also very relevant and current, particularly within the context and framework of the global struggle for human rights and that of minority and vulnerable categories. It is, however, suggested that the normative approach, for example, when we read through the work, we have the impression that it is an activist and human rights advocate writing, largely dominant in the work, could be complemented with a more objective, scientific, and analytical approach. Now, I have two questions, Mr. Chair. My first question: what role play public and private sector to enhance and access of persons with visual impairment to media content during times of conflict in Cameroon, in Anglophone Cameroon? You can give some examples. That is my first question. The second question.
Did you get the question?
Yes, Chair.
What role play public and private actors to enhance? Yes, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first question again: what role play public and private actors to enhance the access of persons with visual impairment to media content during times of conflict in Anglophone Cameroon. I'm saying also that you can take some example to your answer.
Thank you very much, Professor. Please, I didn't get the whether it's announce or renounce.
Enhance, yes, enhance.
Thank you very much for the question, Professor. I think as things stand, with regards to the private sector, we found out that the Cameroon Baptist Convention has once in a while organized trainings. For example, in December 2019, the Cameroon Baptist Convention organized a training for some selected journalists in Mezam to augment their skills and knowledge on inclusive reporting. Mr. Chair, Professor, the Hope Social Union for the Visually Impaired, an organization of blind people in Bamenda, actually organized a smartphone project training in collaboration with some partners to be able to train some women with visual impairment on how to use assistive technologies. And then talking about the public sphere, the government of Cameroon, through the Ministry of Social Affairs, only by the presence of the regional delegation of social affairs in the room, shows how the government has been working on improving access to mass media for persons with visual impairment through the 2000 and furthermore the signing of the 2006 UN Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities in 2006, which is later ratified on December 27, 2021. And then also the 2010 National Law on the Protection and Promotion of Persons with Disabilities, which government has, through related ministries, been striving to see how information accessibility is improved upon. Professor, but at the level of the Anglophone conflict, I think my response is limited to mostly the Cameroon Baptist Convention and the smartphone training.
The second question, if someone says that this work has activist or human rights advocates aspect of collaboration, what do you say in order to show that it is only a scientific work?
Thank you very much, Professor. I stand corrected, but if I were to prove that the work is scientific, I would then present exhibit, the transcripts from the data collection and also images taken with participants in the course of the research, because the interview guides will also be presented, and then relating it to the responses that were gotten from the transcripts, which we still have in our keeping, Professor.
If we put aside transcripts and images, and if we consider only your analysis, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, Professor.
If we put aside transcripts and images, if we take only in consideration your analysis and also your recommendations, can we say that in your work we can see activists or human rights advocates aspect? That's my question.
Professor, using immersion in the study might have suggested that the researchers' experiences as a human rights activist for persons with visual impairment or disabilities generally might have been incorporated. But the researcher was conscious of this and tried to use reflexivity and bracketing and constantly worked with his fathers to ensure that these preconceived notions would not jeopardize the general outcome of the study.
Do you think your language is not going in that direction of activism?
I stand guided, Mr. Chair.
Because sometimes the language, I think that's the examiner's concern. You try as much as possible to withdraw to be scientifically focused and avoid the activist story. But we stayed on because you say you are an activist. An activist. You are an activist. Is that Kesah?
Mr. Chair.
You are an activist now. Do you think you can comfortably detach yourself from your activism?
Professor, especially in the context of this qualitative research, it is difficult for one to completely get cut off from their own area. And that's why, in order to minimize this, it was important to then bring in the other elements.
You know that it's dangerous to bring on both your passion, passion side in research. Bringing your emotion, your personal emotion. Okay, the examiner says he's done.
Mr. Chair, I can see that I am satisfied with the answers of the candidate.
He said, Dr. Nji, Doctor, you have the floor.
Chair, please, can I sip some water?
No, you don't need permission. You have the right to sip water at any time. I simply advise you at the start that you should have a good start. They are realizing you really need water because we're very vocal. We're very eloquent. I think the heat has started now. That's why you need the water. Your voice is lower in that value. We're talking like conferencier at the beginning. Now you are talking like something like Oliver Twist. The Oliver Twistness is just starting. That you are down here wearing that's and it is black, it's going to attract more. Let's go.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will start by equally expressing gratitude for being here. Thank you to the team of the Faculty of Law of the Kesah being here, substituting Professor Kiven, who is bereaved. And I equally also thank Professor Abana, him, my former lecturer, equally Professor Defco, who is here, and I'm learning again from our external examiner, Professor Nji, with this pertinent and in-depth evaluation of this work. I was part of the pre-defense. I can tell that this work has become a good work, and the report of the internal examiner can tell largely in relation to the quality of the work. The general comments by the internal examiner, Professor Kiven, are quite favorable. You have strong points. Of course, definitely you have weak points. And he tells us that it's topical and it's original because the candidate did not go into the physical security aspect. They look at the dimension of accessibility to information by visually impaired person. It's not about humanitarian aspect, displacement dimension, but this is a peculiar and a unique dimension brought in by the candidate, and this is much appreciated by the internal examiner. Equally, according to the internal examiner, the statement is clearly stated, the problem is clearly stated, whether, and we can see how the ideal and equally how the problem is factually supported. This again, we commend that from the strength perspective. And he tells us as well that the methodology is appropriate. The usage of qualitative study, the instruments of data collection, and I think the candidate was able to explain why they remain stuck to interviews. And maybe I may want to ask in terms of those data collection. At the second point of your study, I didn't hear, since you conducted an interview, did you reach saturation, Mr. Kesah?
Yes, Professor. I did reach saturation. Initially, the data collection process was going to, in fact, over 20 journalists were contacted. About 40 persons with visual impairment were contacted. But in the course of the data collection process, we got to saturation. And when saturation was hit, then the other participants were not interviewed for the study because of that reason. But we are not exhausted the list of those we actually contacted to have interviews with them.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, because it was important to note that in your presentation and in the work I went through, it wasn't that clear, just like you're explaining. And again, just like see on the strength of this particular work, the internal examiner talks about the importance of must have, that you raise the aspect of assistive technology, seeing that from that perspective. And he talked about your theoretical framework, but he raised issue in relation to this theoretical framework. He says so much suitable, the theory is suitable, the aspect of complementarity using the egocentric, apocentric is quite interesting. But again, at the level of the apocentric theories that you use, the aspect of kawaida, philosophy, mode, it appears it wasn't presented within the ambit of a framework, right? And I want to ask, how do you differentiate a framework, a theoretical framework from a theoretical review? What is the difference between theoretical framework and theoretical review?
Thank you very much for that question, Professor. In the context of a theoretical review, it appears to be a scoping or systematic review of theories, while a theoretical framework is a template that fits in a particular study?
Yeah, I think that is the right answer. And in this particular work, the Afrocentric theories were presented from a review perspective, from a symbolic model perspective, not within the ambit of the framework. So it's important in your critical framework to mention that, right? Again, those are the feedback from your internal examiner which I'm reporting here. And you told us that visually impaired person that you interviewed originated from Mezam division and Fako division. Why that limitation in that geographical scope? Given that we understand, especially at the level of Fako division, the victim, the visually impaired victim of beyond the Fako division will tell you, fall us to a different story from those 10 you just decided to select from the Fako division. We have other division within the Southwest region that were more tense as far as this conflict is concerned. Why did you limit yourself 10 Fako division? You didn't go beyond Fako division. Same in Norwest, you limited yourself to those division. Why?
Thank you very much, Prof. The idea to geographically limit the study to Mezam and Fako stemmed first from the fact that these two divisions happen to host the regional capitals of the two regions, Northwest and Southwest. And these divisions actually host more persons, these divisional headquarters and regional headquarters actually host more persons with visual impairment. In fact, Professor, we found out, or we noticed from literature, that more persons with visual impairment have been displaced from the more remote divisions, especially divisions in the Northwest, like the Momo division and Menju, where health facilities had been destroyed. A lot of them had been displaced to Mezam, Bamenda to be specific. The two divisions were also relatively safer for the researcher to be able to collect data because it was a bit difficult thinking of how to access the other more hostile areas, especially when access to information is even more difficult in those areas, given that media organs have been destroyed. Also, given that signals of broadcast media and even internet services are not in some of the enclave environments. And so it guided the understanding to base the study, its findings in Mezam and Fako divisions.
Yeah, I think there is understood, but it's also important, equally important to bring out that aspect of being displaced from those remote areas. Because the impression you are giving here is they originate from Mezam and Fako division. Meanwhile, in your explanations, you are telling us that some of them were displaced, finding themselves here. So we need to have that, because when you have it, you make it more representative. You understand why I raised that particular question. So we can get to the two questions raised by the internal examiner, Professor Kesah. Professor Melu raised an aspect on acknowledgement. I think that was that acknowledgement is an academic exercise. When you are acknowledging, you are not acknowledging just for acknowledgement's sake. You acknowledge those who, especially at the level of academics, those who contributed. I've seen you acknowledging academically, you've acknowledge your supervisor, co-supervisor, very good. You got into the HOD and some professor. But I can't see the names of those who contributed during the seminar presentation, which are lecturers of the department. I can't see the names of those who contributed during the pre-defense in your work. So this is an academic fallacy. You need to correct that particular aspect. It's very important when you discuss of acknowledgement. It's a very, very important section of your work when you are discussing it. So Professor Kesah asked two questions here. I think you discussed this aspect of immersion that you were talking, because he also raised it here. You were talking about meeting your supervisors, reading a document to disconnect yourself from that activist perspective or from that passion perspective. How, in actual fact, did you do it?
Thank you very much for the question. In formulating the research questions and objectives for the study, in formulating the instruments for data collection, these areas were overly discussed with the supervisors and even other academics to guide a more scholarship-oriented inquiry.
Okay. I will not elaborate on that particular point. It's kind of debatable. Let me just end here where getting with the two questions specifically. And before I even get to those questions, look at your list of abbreviation and acronym. The list is not exhaustive. It's incomplete. A lot of abbreviation acronym found in the text and not found in the list of acronyms. Please correct that. And there are other things that you may want to ask the person who's been looking at your work. There are some words which are joined because you're taking the lightly. So also take cognizance of that. So this the external examiner says it. It's a participant recruitment process. It says it is unclear how PVI and media professionals were identified and selected. For instance, he asks the first question and you really answer the first question and then we get the second question. And we don't at that level. Where PVI participants contacted through disability associations, rehabilitation centers, or personal networks? That is the first question.
They were contacted through both networks, personal networks, and also organizations of persons with disabilities.
Okay, and so in you contacting them, it was a purposive, right? Exactly was purposive. You were looking for key information. In those personal networks, without the basis of information they possess on the basis of your relationship with those participants?
There were some criteria that were identified, that were laid down for how to select participants for the study. The first was that the participants should be someone, that's for the PVI, should be someone who must have lived or have been living in the Northwest and Southwest Mezaman for at least 3 months. There should be people who have something that can prove that they are people with visual impairment, like National Disability Card, for example, or the white cane. However, we noticed that in some cases, some participants had lost their documents, their mobility aids, and some people too had just gotten their vision impairment as a result of the conflict. Consequently, we intentionally decided that in collecting the data, if we came across those kind of people, then we would consider them. But we mostly had this kind of people through snowball sampling and not purposefully.
So you are telling us it was on the basis of the information they possess, not on the basis of the personal connection, since you also talk about personal networks. That's what you're saying.
The personal networks was just to get the contacts of these persons. Like, for example,
Understood. Thank you. Yeah. So it's on the basis of the information they possess, since you call them key informant, right?
Yes, okay.
The last question, and we rest my case here. Professor Kiven asks, were media professionals drawn from public, private, or community media?
We had a heterogeneous participation from media professionals. For example, in Bamenda, of the 6 people who were interviewed, 5 were managers of different media organs, including online. We had radio, we had television as well, and in Vaco we even had a photojournalist, an international photojournalist. We had a radio station manager, we had broadcast journalists, we had even also newspaper journalists, so they were diverse.
Okay. Public or private?
Both.
And Professor Kiven concludes here. He said he therefore concludes that this thesis makes here, that's the conclusion here, makes a significant contribution to communication studies and disability research. Equally, he said it demonstrates scholarly rigor and policy relevance, and lastly, he said, deserves recognition as a valuable academic work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Kiven. Do you agree with that concluding statement? Do you agree with that concluding statement?
Not yet, Professor. Chair, I think I'm here for corrections, and which I've already had quite a good number of significant contributions, which I will carry back to my supervisors.
So you are disagreeing with Prof. Kiven? You think that's humility? Kiven has appreciated your work. I said, are you okay with it? Kesah, you are pretending to be very humble. You are happy about that comment. You are very happy about that. If I were you, I would just say, well, if Prof. Kiven has said so, then I can't object to it. You cannot say, oh, so you are saying Prof. Kiven is wrong in saying so because many things have been said that are not too good, and so you will go and correct. So you are contradicting Prof. Kiven.
Not Chair. Chair, sorry if I poorly framed the language. I meant that implementing.
Are you a lawyer? It was not a poor phraseology. You went ahead to explain. It was a kind of like rejecting politely what Prof. Kiven is trying to be very humble. Okay, let me pass the floor to give the floor to Prof. Abagma.
Thank you, Chair. I went through a number of pages, and I would like to dwell on some of these pages 11 to 12. There you have your research questions, you have objectives, and then you have research assumptions. In your specific objectives in page 12 are not numbered. I don't know whether it's deliberate or it's an error, or it's only found in our book. The only number that came out, which is number 3, they came out as number 1. Okay, an error. Okay, if you go to specific research question 3, how effective are the measures adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment during the Anglophone conflict? we assume that objective 3 should spring from that. And we have objective 3 as to evaluate the measures which have been adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment during an informed conflict. That word effectiveness is missing there. So I will see it as to evaluate the effectiveness of measures adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment during the informed conflict. Then, research assumption 3, which we also expect to spring from that. You have it as limited measures have been adopted to improve access to mass media for persons with visual impairment during their informed conflict. But it should actually be the measures adopted have a significant improvement in the access of mass media for persons with visual impairment during their informed conflict. Then page 18. The organization of the study. My impression is that it needs more detailed briefs, and it should be in chapters. Organization of chapter 1, organization of chapter 2, organization of chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, in paragraphs. In different paragraphs, not long together. Then I'll take you to page 111. There we have study area, and I'll join the external examiner to support the view that at least you need mathematics there. You just have the topic is assessing mass media during conflict, needs and challenges of persons with visual impairment in the Anglophone conflict. The Anglophone conflict where we need to know location of the study with the maps there. The map of Cameroon is possible. The map of Cameroon indicating south and northwest. And if possible, the different maps of the northwest and southwest. You need it there. Okay. 118. Yes, there are sampling techniques, use purposive and snowball. Can you tell us how you told us how you use it, how you employ the purposive? But the snowball, how did you employ it? How did you use the snowball?
Thank you very much, Professor, for the question. Snowball being a method of always seeking to know potential participants for the research from the other participants. The way it was used was that from interviews with participants that were purposely selected, the researcher then was able to ask if the participants could recommend other people within their networks whom they felt would have good insight, information that would also be important in driving the study. And so when the contact were provided, the researcher reached out to these potential participants, and then some of them now were interviewed.
Okay. And then too, I joined the external examiner in the issue of representative tools. All your sampling techniques are do not show representativeness. They do not indicate that you could generalize your findings, because I don't know, most of researches in your department, I would say so, are followed. If you go through 3/4 of researches in your department, they use purpose. Somebody can carry out the study and challenge me. And maybe this is because of the method. Most of them are quantitative researches in your department. More than 3/4 are qualitative researches. Would you consider your own research as qualitative or quantitative?
It's qualitative, Professor.
But I have some figures and even I have some figures in that chapter 3. What is the intention of those figures? Are they there for form?
Professor, I think the figures were put to highlight the humanitarian death of the Anglophone conflict on the civilian population among who are persons with visual impairment.
Would I say you had a passion for quantitative research, but the department could not permit you carry out quantitative research?
Not really, Professor.
But with the type of sampling techniques, you cannot generalize your findings. The findings cannot be generalized. And I joined the external examiner that they are not represented. You cannot generalize your findings, what happened in other regions, what happened especially, what happened within the southwest and northwest regions, what happens in other regions. It cannot be generalized because of the sampling techniques. Okay. You have also been accused of advocacy. I don't want to ask you the philosophical framework of your research, because I know you will not know it. Do you know it? What is the philosophical framework of your research?
I am constructivist, Professor.
Constructivist. It is mainly
constructivism.
It is not constructivism. It is not. It is advocacy and liberatory. Advocacy, in the sense that you are requesting for a certain change in behavior. And if you think of advocacy and liberatory frameworks, you have people like Paulo Freire. Go and read their theoretical frameworks of research, and then see how you can state in your work, so that you will not be accused of advocacy throughout the work. Yes, if you are using the advocacy and liberatory framework, you have a right to do what you have done in your work. You would have explained to them that you are using the advocacy and liberatory framework, and then you state what it requires, and then your work will be okay the way you did it.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes. You have two sets of references. Go to page 116. 216. You have references. And then when you go to page 31 of the appendix, you also have references. And the references in page 31 of the appendix are numbered. But the ones that appear in page 216 are not numbered. Is that a style? Is that an error?
There was an error, Professor.
Okay. You mean there was number in the article? Okay. You look at it. Okay. If Dr. Mbiatem asks you the difference between theoretical review and theoretical framework by follow-up,
Indeed, Professor.
He said, what's the difference between theoretical review and theoretical framework?
Professor, I understand theoretical review to be some systematic review of theories, maybe some scoping review of theories for some broad story, while theoretical framework would be limited to a particular aspect, not broad, a frame that can fit in a particular study. And I understood from his question that I made use of reviewing more than framing the theory in the context of access to mass media for persons with visual impairment during conflict. A correction which I humbly adhere to, Professor.
Yes, the theoretical framework is a frame of the theories in the work. You just get bits of ideas in the theories and then lay them out in a frame. That's the theoretical framework. You understand?
Yes,
You can also have a conceptual framework, a concept, the main concept of it. Okay. Okay, I'll go back to your word. If you were asked to review this work, what will you add and what will you subtract?
Thank you very much, Professor. If I were to have a chance to do the work, I would.
You still have the chance.
I would then incorporate the advocacy and liberative frame
Philosophical.
paradigm to so that I will not be charged for being more of an advocate than a researcher. I would also improve on the framing of the theories instead of reviewing. I would also ensure that my voice is reflected in the review of empirical literature. Take home from the external reviewer. I think this would be some of the key inputs that I will make in the new work, Professor.
Chair.
Okay. I like the last answers. Those answers, I mean, the response to that question by Prof. Abang. It means you were really following the criticism. Because some candidates, when they receive, when they are being hammered, they tend to forget, but they are looking more of the disgrace aspect. They are succumb to disgrace because they have family behind and so on. It's like they have been humiliated. They keep focusing on it and they forget they don't listen to what you are saying. They have been able to capture the major trends in terms of how you can improve the quality of the work, which is very good. Are you writing on something? Are you typing?
Someone is taking notes on my behalf.
No, you see the intellectual capacity of a young man. He's just listening that he can pick up. Now, before I hand you over, let me just get some few clarifications. This is out of curiosity. This first one. Why did you dedicate the work to your grandma?
Professor,
if you don't feel comfortable,
no, I do, Professor.
It's just, that's why I say it's curiosity, out of curiosity.
I think Grandma, who is nearing 83 now, played a pivotal role in having me go to school. Because like any other person with visual impairment in rural communities, no one saw the need for me to go to school. And I was home while my mates went to school. It was only later that I think Reverend Sister Cecilia is here, who came and then spoke with Grandma and said she knew something where I could be taken to so that I would have access to education. And Granny, who had been crying all day, asking whether it was possible for her to even give me her one eye, embraced the idea. And I can say without missing word, Mr. Chair, that my fees was paid from the sales of potatoes for so many years by Grandma. And I felt that the only way to
Did you acknowledge the sisters?
I don't really remember, Professor. Chair, if I did. But if not, then it was an oversight.
Yes, there are some sisters. They're there. Okay, that's good. I see you are very emotional about that. And that's why I said it's out of curiosity. I'm sorry about that. Sorry. Can we continue?
Yes, Chair.
What modern technologies have you identified that can be used to enhance access to media by visually impaired persons?
Mr. Chair, I think from what we got from the field, assistive technologies such as screen readers like NVDAs for the computer, JAWS, and then for the phone, TalkBack, Seeing AI, a host of them. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, in the global south, most of such technologies come with a lot of limitations. They usually require that even buying the full package sometimes is difficult. You download, do the payment, and it will not function well. Most of them operate well in the West. And so, but these ones that are existing are pretty difficult to be operated by most persons with visual impairment and requires a lot of learning. So I think one of the things we were already doing in the course of the research is that we identified some of these assistive technologies, we recorded them, and then shared with some of the offices of the different organizations of persons with visual impairment so that they could see how their members could benefit from them.
Did you make any recommendation to government in that respect?
That existing policies should really, be harnessed, implementation should be accelerated. Because the 2010 law actually focuses on this, but the laws have implementation is where the difficulties have come.
In fact, I didn't have a question on that, right? Because my concern was to what extent have the 2006 Disability Convention, UN Convention, been domesticated in the 2010 law and the 2021 decree?
Mr. Chair, if you look at that 2010 law, it is developed from the spirit of endorsing the 2006 Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Because, for example, if we were to pick out the lines that are related to the subject under scrutiny, then the 2010 UN Convention states that state parties should ensure that persons with disabilities have information that is put in accessible format. Now, the 2010 law now narrows it down and makes it even clearer to say that disabled people should have information compatible with the nature of their impairments.
Okay, what did the 2021 decree do as the enabling instrument to that law?
The 2021 decree, December 27 to be specific, Chair, actually came to, because for a very long time Cameroon had endorsed, was signatory to the 26 convention, but had not ratified it. So official ratification now opens the floodgate for both public, like the Ministry of Social Affairs, but also non-state actors to now be able to see how, together with the 2018 text of application for the 2010 law, could now enforce that international obligation.
Have there been any strides so far?
Yes, Professor.
Practically?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Professor. I think the Ministry of Social Affairs has from time to time organized trainings, though not really about access to mass media, but they have organized trainings in the light of enforcing, especially the areas of physical accessibility, because most African countries, including Cameroon, are still battling with physical accessibility, while the West is already more on digital accessibility, Professor. So more action now is tilted toward physical accessibility, respecting the international universal design on building ramps, lifts, all those things. And Cameroon, if you look at the new ministries in Yaoundé, the buildings that have been constructed, they are relatively more inclusive, meaning that Cameroon has been following up with that international commitment. But in the domain of mass media accessibility, which is somehow more digital, because for persons with visual impairment to be able to access mass media seamlessly, they then need knowledge on how to use these assistive technologies, and this is more digital, and that's where Cameroon has really yet to fully embrace.
Not only access, what I call it, the tools. The tools.
Yes.
Because only organizing seminars to drink coffee, eat pieces of cake and have it as achievements is half-baked. The seminar should normally go with the tools on how to use. You cannot be teaching people how to use or how to access without the samples on the ground. That's mere noise. Don't you think so?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and that's why this research is now coming, because before now we've not seen scholarly research that really document the mass media options, the challenges, and then measures that should.
So now, how are you going to, since you are claiming that no research has done that, and so the government will not really understand the magnitude of the lack of those tools and how to use them. What if you were called upon as a consultant, what would you do? How would you push the agenda?
Professor, please let me answer that from threefold. The first is that so far, what I will look at it from what has happened, what is currently happened, and what we intend to do. Professor, so far we've published an article which is attached for the consideration, titled "Strengthening Mass Media Access for Persons with Visual Impairment in the Cameroon Anglophone Conflict: An Evaluation of Current Measures and Future Directions." Mr. Chair, we have also been able to present this in person at an international conference, a Buea International Conference, and the discourse was titled "Role of Conflict Resolution Practitioners in Fostering Disability Inclusion Through Technology." What we are currently doing, Professor, Mr. Chair, at this point we have a cream of media experts drafted from both international and local media, including the BBC, CRTV, Equinox, and a host of other digital and broadcast media from the Northwest and Southwest regions who are present here. And these media personnel are not just media personnel, but they are prosumers. It means they are consumers of what they produce. First, they will be knowledgeable from this discourse. Secondly, they will now dispatch the information through their different media channels. It's important to also mention that we also have even heads of media organizations represented here. We have leaders of organizations of persons with visual impairment, like the Hope Social Union for the Visually Impaired, the National Association for the Blind, the Organization for the Realization of an Inclusive Society. We have FOOSI. All of these leaders too are here. They are learning from the conversation, and when they go back, they will also be able to replicate, to dispatch the knowledge in their different organizations, because most of them meet monthly. And also, Professor, what we are yet to do would be first to hand a brief of our summaries to the President of the National Communication Council, who is heading the organization charged with regularizing and sanctioning media operations in Cameroon. We would also carry out more research on the subject, but more importantly, we would then see how we work with these media organizations, with these OPT structures, to build a strong rapprochement, organizing workshops for journalists to augment their skills on how to report inclusively. We would also recommend, Mr. Chair, to the universities of Buea and Bamenda's departments of Journalism and Mass Communication and the Department of Communication and Development, that inclusive reporting should be incorporated in the curriculum. This way, Mr. Chair, I humbly believe that the gap of media or difficulties accessing mass media for the blind community in times of conflict could then be mitigated.
That's good. You mentioned human rights in the literature class, right?
Yes, Chair.
I saw it as a bulletin. What is the gap here?
The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Mr. Chair, to the best of my thinking, actually highlights that access to information is a human right for everybody. Because when in 1948...
No. As a gap.
As a gap...
It's a human right, it is undeniable. Right? But how is it a gap? When you were defining the literature gap, you mentioned human rights.
As a principle. Because in introducing that section, Mr. Chair, we saw both principles, knowledge...
Were you trying to say, for example, that earlier researchers have not addressed the issue from a human rights perspective? Is that?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I think, my understanding, I think that's what you were trying to say, that the human rights component could be a push, but which unfortunately has been sidelined in earlier researches.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. But then you have to do more research. Okay?
Yes,
You
Chair.
do more research, human rights-based approach to access to media information by persons with visual impairment. So you're more specific, okay? So it's not just using the expression human rights. You need to get into the literature to see how the human rights framework beyond the convention itself, how the principles, the human rights principles can be evoked to reinforce the protection of that right, access. Now, was it necessary to define the Anglophone conflict? Is it a concept?
It's more of a construct, Mr. Chair.
So was it necessary to define Anglophone conflict?
What motivated me to get into that is my participation, attending previous intellectual discourses like this, Mr. Chair. I noticed that it was a very important subject, always coming up, and most panel members usually recommend that it was good to really get into the nitty-gritty of the conflict. And then I thought that it would be good.
But my problem is, should you explain it as a concept? Would it not have been a background, explaining what is the Anglophone, so-called Anglophone conflict, other than extricating it as and examining it as a concept? Is it a concept as such? Or you want, of course, I'm asking because it's a PhD thesis. If you are, a thesis is coming up with a new approach to looking at things. You are growing. You are growing, and it's not only growing, but you are adding to existing knowledge. You are free to say you are trying to conceptualize it. You are trying to that it should be understood as a concept, a construct.
That's actually what I was seeking to do, especially when the other works were criticized not to have that section, Mr. Chair.
You see, I'm personally, I don't like that phraseology Anglophone conflict. It's like something we were born, Anglophones were born with. Or is it a template? Is it a kind of conflict that we found we can use it, we can apply it to ourselves, to our own situation because we are Anglophones? Is it something that exists somewhere, a concept that exists, and our own is just being, mirrored in it? Or are we trying to say Anglophones are conflict-laden?
My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that...
I always like the other formula, that is the conflicts in the Anglophone regions, because the conflicts came and met the regions. The Anglophones are not born as conflict propagators. To me, it's pejorative. I know it's a personal point of view.
It makes sense to me, Mr. Chair.
one exists, yeah, and then the other one is typical of
Which one is
so
that?
they are different. Anglophone conflict. That's a conflict that Anglophones live with.
Yeah.
But if we talk of conflict in the Anglophone region, it's something which is temporary.
Yeah, to me it's temporal. Exactly, you are even putting more steam into my fire. Because when it's like the conflict will never end, so it's part of us. It's part of our culture, we're born in it, and so we'll continue. That's why I say I prefer that one which shows that it is temporal. It is time bound. The conflict in the Anglophone region. To show that there were people and the conflicts came.
It is inbuilt, that is why the regulating that.
I don't think it is proper. It is not inbuilt. It's not inbuilt. Perhaps Anglophones are open-minded and they are more realistic in making their claims. Not that they are naturally conflict-laden people. I think they are peaceful people. Now, there is something you said which I think I wrote a paper on this. I tried to define the concept of anglophone or anglophoneness. What the French would call anglophone. So my question is, what is the degree of ancestry? Because you mentioned that you define anglophone as someone who can be identified as someone who has ancestral origins in the Anglophone region, not someone who simply adopts the language. Yes.
Mr. Chair, Britain, following the defeat of Germany in Cameroon in 1916, Britain took over, and first of all, under the League of Nations, Cameroon was a mandated territory. Southern.
In fact, you are going towards my concern.
As Professor, I believe that those born in 1916, now it's over 100 years. Those born before that time would have died.
Can you call them ancestors? That was my concern. Because it's colonialism that came and gave us those statuses, Anglophones, Francophones, and so on. And you are trying to tie into ancestry. 1916, can you say someone born in 1916 is an ancestor? In other words, what's the standard of ancestry to define Anglophoneness?
Chair, if I were to answer from the spirit of an article that we are currently working on, rebuilding a new ancestry for our children's education and future directions. Ancestry is viewed from two lenses. The first is by some blood, but the other is by attachment. I believe, Mr. Chair, I stand corrected, that ancestry could be constructed and it could also be by blood. So I'm talking about the constructed ancestry to the Northwest and Southwest.
I don't understand your constructive. They are constructive. Because they are constructive. You want to deceive us. I don't see how you can you successfully tie ancestry to Anglophoneness. Because there was no Anglophone before 1960. Even by blood, it will be very difficult. Because we come from different tribal, or what do you call them, clans and whatever. The origins of some Cameroonians is traced from South Sudan. The people in the grass field So how do you? So you see, what you are saying is beautiful, but scientifically, does it hold water? Question mark. Anyway, you are a researcher. You are a researcher. It depends on the extent to which you can defend that. But you see, I'm like an observer who is prompting your mind that there are loopholes in your construct. And so if you are trying to build the construct, make sure you close those gaps which may be open to criticism. Otherwise, you'll be a weak constructivist, or your approach will be bound in weak constructivism. Is that okay?
Very okay, Chief. Thank you very much.
All right. Last thing. You said when you arrived at chapter. You said chapter. You said that the section is it chapter dealing with findings.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4.
The lifeblood.
You said this is the lifeblood. What did you mean by lifeblood?
That it is the main focus of the research. Otherwise, it would have been more of a review of literature.
Don't you think that expression was too loose?
I just learned so.
It was loose. It's not really academic. That's pedestrian. It's like the man talking on the sidewalk, on the street. So it's like now we are activists. What would an academic say? What would be the appropriate expression?
Mr. Chair, that it is the area where the research is meaningfully contributing.
No. He said it's a lifeblood. Just use few words too. There are options.
That is the presentation of the results, the findings of the study.
They call. I cannot blame you. I cannot. Sitting on that position and concentrating, responding to all these questions is very evident. So there are certain things which may just elude your consciousness. So it's the heart of the study, the core of the study.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
That would have been better expressions. Okay. I will hand the floor to your supervisors, the people you call your fathers. It's those of us on this side who can say your fathers. So I'm free to say your fathers, your academic fathers. So Prof. Nefru is your main supervisor. They will decide how they are going to tell us how you walk through this journey.
Thank you, the chairperson. This very minute, intellectuals, professors, great scholars, great minds. You also double not just as the chairperson of this panel, but also as the dean, because of faculty of law. I want to appreciate your leadership. Besides your intellectual capacity, you are humor in handling a panel of this magnitude. I appreciate that. And under your watch, the faculty is moving forward. It's on record that the Faculty of Law and Political Science has produced a high number of PhD graduates in this university. It's on record. Thanks to the environment you create, conducive environment, students and lecturers. Not just the quantum of PhD production in this university, but also the quality of lecturers in every promotion exercise our lecturers are promoted. I think presently, Princely should be the only assistant lecturer in the faculty, because all have been promoted. Just in the last promotion exercise. My brother and friend, Professor Emil, is now a professor, assistant professor. Professor Kiven is now a full assistant professor. And many others, professor. All because of the conducive environment it creates for productivity in his faculty. I think other faculties should admire you, a role model. We appreciate you because we appreciate you. Thank you very much for that leadership. Of course, our external examiner, all the way from University of Buea, so Fred, Jeremy, you're welcome. Welcome to the place to be, the University of Buea. I think recently I was in the University of Buea. I was in the same panel. Yes, recently I was there. I want to thank you for coming. You see, external examination of a PhD thesis is very crucial. It's the crux of the Anglophone or Anglo-Saxon culture. Because in the pre-defense, the university scrutinizes the work of the candidates. And the examiners come now, they come now to validate and consolidate what the department did, what the faculty did, and the equation, what the University of Buea has done. Thank you for coming. Of course, my brother and friend, Professor Abamna, we're always together everywhere. The team gets together to see how we improve, nurture great minds. Thank you for giving me your claim. Appreciate you. And Dr. Bian, sitting in for Dr. Kiven, you're welcome. We're happy to see young intellectuals like you. Yes, and we're also playing a very important role in nurturing people like you to take over from us when we go to time. Very important. Because my colleague, Professor Susu, are always together. They're all welcome. I want to agree with the chairperson of this panel that in spite of the challenge of candidate, is exceptionally very intelligent, very hardworking, very brilliant, very creative, very innovative, very assiduous. We all listen to his presentation. Very eloquent, very fluent, very meticulous, very articulate. The chairperson, with all sense of responsibility, as a professor of political science, I want to state that the thesis of Kesah Princely has met all the requirements, the global standard, benchmark for the award of a PhD comparable to any university globally. It has 5 chapters, encapsulated, embedded in 5 chapterization. Chapter 1, for example, introduction, it told us background to the study, statement of the problem, research questions, research objectives, the assumptions, research assumptions, the significance of the work, the scope and limitation, the operational definition of them, the summation of this presentation. Chapter 2, of course, literature review, empirical review, literature gap, theoretical framework. Chapter 3, methodology, starting from study area, research design, sample population, instrumentation, and ethical consideration. Chapter 4, they say the blood wire of the work, the crops, the work, the core, so to speak. Talk about data presentation, analysis, and discussion of findings. Starting with demographic information, then ending up with discussion of findings. Chapter 5, summary, conclusion, recommendation. And his references, bibliography, Western articles, journals, etc. I think from my point of view, all the requirements, the benchmark of the PhD are all satisfied. However, some worries were raised by the panel. The external examiner had worried about the differences in chapters, pages, and I want to say that the demand for each chapter differs and cannot be the same in any university. Cannot be the same. But the magnitude, the application, the content of each chapter differs. You cannot expect all to be the same. That it can not be possible. Then operational definition of term. In all the 5 seminars we had, the candidate, the panel instructed him to define mass media, visual impairment, Anglophone conflict. It was instructed by the panel that these key technologies in the topic must be defined, which he has done. The third worry of the final examiner was that the presentation of the case study is not representative of, not a representation of Cameroon. I want to say that the presentation of the case study must not necessarily be a reflection of the program. On page 113, I want to draw your attention to 113. Last paragraph, 113. The candidate says, the political situation in the Northwest and Southwest region is characterized by a widespread feeling of political and economic marginalization among Anglophones. It went further to say they often perceive that they are underrepresented in governance, that resources are unfairly distributed, and that their concerns are disregarded. Therefore, the case study is peculiar to a particular segment of the population who, according to the candidate, are marginalized and exploited. Then the next worry, the question of passion or emotion of the candidate as a human rights activist does not influence in any way the policy recommendation to the research, because the usage of the instrumentality of interview neutralizes such perception. The selection of the participants were holistic from different schools of thought, different opinions. The respondents' responses influence the perception of policy recommendation and not that of the candidate. Anyway, the chairperson, distinguished professors, this panel, I want to say that the essence of this exercise is for us to interest together to see how we can improve on the quality of this work, which we have just done, so that this work can be consumed at a global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening for those clarifications. But I just want to come back to the one on the pagination, the number of pages. I think the examiner, our colleague, has a background from the French or Francophone background. They require some minimum equilibrium between the chapters. So he's talking from that perspective. It's also legitimate, because sometimes even if the chapter demands to be longer, the chapter demands to be longer than another, it should not be exaggeratedly long. For example, 18 pages and almost 90 pages for another. I think it is exaggeratedly disproportionate. Let me hand the floor to Professor Sunju, the newest professor in town.
Thank you very much, Chair, the Dean of the Agricultural Faculty. It's a big honor, and I feel very elated that you are chairing this panel for the first candidate I am supervising as somebody in the rank of magistrat. Let me use the French expression. So it is an honor to be chairperson, Professor, and I want to thank you for accompanying this candidate and this panel and us as supervisors through all this process. Thank you very much, dear Professor, for your mentorship. I also want to thank my dear colleague and elder brother, Professor Medu, all the way from the University of Buea. Thank you, Professor Medu, and thank you also for your congratulating messages. I thank you very much for the examination of the country. Thank you again, Prof. Obama. Like Dr. Biatem said, who was my lecturer from the first year in university. So thank you very much, Prof, for all that you've done to support us and now to support grandchildren like Kesah. Yeah. And Prof, thank you very much for the mentorship. I think this is the second or third kind of supervising, and so I've enjoyed a very cordial working relationship, and I have enjoyed and benefited from your mentorship. And to my dear brother, Dr. Mbiatem Albert, It's my pleasure to see you on this panel representing our head of department, Professor James, who is supposed to be the internal examiner. In that regard, I want to offer our condolences to him and his family, given the loss of their father. We hope that they can find solace in the Lord. Coming back to the business of the day, Kesah's work, Kesah Princely Kesah, accessing mass media during conflict, needs and challenges of persons with visual impairment in the Cameroon Anglophone Conflict. I acknowledge the polemical nature of the concept I've raised by the chair. This is a major departure from a majority of the thesis and research work we've seen in conflict resolution, in international relations, and political science, and in law in the last 7 to 8 years. Students simply doing generic studies on Anglophone conflict, resolution mechanisms to Anglophone conflict. This candidate has taken a major and very brave attempt to explore a niche that has been highly under-researched. And his work brings together 3 core disciplines: disability studies, which is an aspect of human rights issues. So that's why one of the reasons why the chair, who is the professor of human rights and law, human rights, is here to chair this panel. It brings issues of communication studies, and lastly, peace and conflict studies. So Kesah, despite obvious challenges on the field, has been able to thread through these issues in a very clear and objective manner. He displays a lot of empathy in the study, which at times can come across as advocacy or activism. It is because of that passion that he has and his background in communication, which also makes his style of presentation very activist in nature. But that is not to say that the work is an activist piece of work. This is a very rich scientific piece of work that has mobilized theories not just from the West, as we often see in many places, trying to make it an African study by incorporating African theoretical dimensions. And I think that the work contributes significantly to the job in terms of the new data that he has generated through key informant interviews. In terms of his methodology, he relied on a network of people with visual impairment and journalists on the field. The study is qualitative in nature. There is a tendency within science to undermine qualitative studies and to overemphasize quantitative studies as the real science. But I beg to differ with that. In that, there are many issues that qualitative studies can bring to shed light on that numbers at times hide. So it is not the position of the department that students must only do qualitative studies. We teach both qualitative and quantitative methods, so it's a mixed methods. But depending on the nature of the students and their ability to conduct a mixed method study or to conduct a qualitative study, when you look at this work, the emotions and the passions of those people that you're speaking to come out very clearly. But if you hide those emotions behind numbers, it may be difficult to understand the depth of the situation. So I think that this study, the scientific contribution of this study cannot be undermined because it is a qualitative study. The candidate has employed a rigorous methodology, trying at times always, and the Professor Ndefo and I always told about trying to extricate himself from that study, because as someone who is visually impaired himself, who is a communication expert, it could sometimes derail the process of science. And that is why we insisted that we have to include a positionality statement to clearly define its position vis-a-vis the work and to keep himself aside as a researcher in this aspect. In terms of the candidate, this is a very, very proud moment for me personally, because I can say that Kesah is one of my academic children, to use the expression father, professor, chair. When he first came to the university as an undergraduate, within the first 2 years, within the first 1 month, one colleague told him that, what are you doing here? Your place is not in the university. You cannot go here. And I think that challenged him. That challenged him. And every time he always told me, Dr. Sudo, please treat me like other students. I don't deserve any preferential treatment because I am a student like others. And that is the mentality of the candidate that we have here before us. He has demonstrated that ability to overcome adversity. And Professor Chair, he is also a colleague in the department. And I'm sure you chaired the panel that recruited him. And he was not recruited based on a quota system. He was out of merit. And he's already contributing to already empowering younger ones in the department. So our relationship has been nothing short of cordial. And I can report that it was on those days that we recommended that this be submitted for a public defense. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Sudo. I said doctor. You see, because it is new, we still need to adapt to the new situation. And it's perhaps because we have not poured libation on the title. So we are still going back. Anyway, it will come. It's coming back. Mr. Kesah,
Chair.
do you know that from what we have learned today, it is because of who some God-sent sisters that you are here. Do you know that?
Yes, Chair.
This, yeah, the audience, we have never seen this number of sisters in the defense. To show how much you mean to them, not how much you meant to them, but how much you mean. Because to me, they are at the beginning and at the end of this process. You made a very clear and honest submission. I will not say honest submission. You made a clear submission. Informing me today on how you started off your educational journey, which is very emotional. Very emotional. And I would like the audience to know that when Kesah, Prof. Nji has just touched the issue lightly, I'd like to share this. Because some people may think that it's bias, favorably bias. I started by praising the candidate, but very intelligent. It's very intelligent. You don't need to convene a special jury, or if you put, I think if you put Kesah in any situation, he will blossom. He just needs to fall on the ground. Even if the ground is unfettered, he was proud. When he came for the interview, and I want to make this clear, he was the only master student who was retained for that. We produced one different has just made it. There's so many doctors here. So when it was time for recruitment, we had so many doctors online who are really defended. In terms of preference, academic preference, academic logic, those doctors would have been taken. But it was a fair exercise, it was an open exercise where you had to prove your worth before the panel. Believe you me, this gentleman answered every other question and he had to be stopped. Right? You remember I said he's a talker. It's experience I've gotten from my experience. He had to be stopped because at every question, the answers were just too good. And we don't really want to waste more time asking questions or listening to them. When we went for because we were at one stage, the initial stage, there is this mega stage where the university and the executives from the ministry come to vet the process. Kesah was, because I can now say because it's over, but there's no secret about it. Kesah was third on that list. He needed 2. Because the ministry insists that the proof of inclusion of people from the diaspora. So we needed someone from the diaspora. We need to protect our own house. So in all that, because he was a master student, he played a little disfavor. Despite his brilliance, so he was number 3. You did 2 that department. So, on presenting the case to the faculty, I draw the attention of the board that the 10th candidate you are seeing there is a person with a disability, it's a visual impairment. It's a very good candidate. Vice Chancellor will help the situation and immediately huge to say, Mr. King, don't worry, we are continuing. Mr. Kesah, it goes back to those 3 sisters, or 4 or 5. Your grandmother had to be very good. That's why these sisters could identify you. It was a prayer, and the sisters responded. If you are anything tomorrow, my advice is those sisters and their legacy or their legatees, because they may not be there forever. You should always have them in mind, because they're the true foundation. Together with your grandma, that you have so lovely dedicated this work to. I know you fast become a lecturer. Just a matter of time, because you need this age to become a lecturer. You are only 2 of you, right? And then next year you become a lecturer. And the road is clear ahead of you. The sky is going to be your limit. So you are going to defend the sky. We will not be here, most obviously, some of us. But we know, we can see. On that note, it sounds a bit emotional. It's not going to affect the decision of this parent. I'm going to ask any parents whether any other case, anything to say, anyone has any other advice or concern or whatever. If not, I'll ask Mr. Kesah. Kesah, do you have anything to say? Please.
Yes, Chair.
Go ahead.
I want to first of all start by recognizing the role of the chair, who is not only a chair of this very important intellectual exercise is my dean of faculty. In few words, if I were going to borrow from Professor Bernard von Lonsokika, says that if one were as intelligent, that they had degrees corresponding to the 26 letters of the alphabet, but do not know the truth, then the person is an ignoramus. I can say without blabbing that the dean of the Faculty of Laws and Political Science is intentionally inclusive. I think that is testament in the way he piloted the affairs of his panel, but more importantly, in the way he has been building inclusion. And I think that his fatherly approach was a huge challenge to me. And I've been wondering what I can really do to join him, make the faculty a better place for persons with visual impairment and persons with disabilities in general. And I'm sure that his exchanges we do in this session clearly set a benchmark for that. I equally want to thank the external reviewer, Professor Jeremy, who left right away from Douala through bumpy roads, through traffic, to help mentor me, to groom me, and to make me a better researcher. Professor, your efforts is not forgotten. I want to appreciate input from Professor Abangma James, whose indefatigable contributions are a substrate on which I'm building going forward. I cannot end without thanking Dr. Mbiata, who is deputizing my head of department, who unfortunately is bereaved. Doctor, thank you for your coming. Thank you for your contributions. The desiderator says that if you think that any contribution is ever too small, then lock yourself up with a single mosquito in the room and see the kind of damage it will cause. I want to say that you might be a senior lecturer, but your contributions speak volume. I want to thank my supervisors, Professor Delfu John, whose roadmap was very defining in the path I took. Always there to follow me up and to ensure that I was walking on the right path. Professor, I pray that God gives you the strength of 1,000 elephants to do better things. For Professor Emile Sunjo, I want to say that he has been more than a mentor. I recall he gave me money for break papers during our master's classes when I was not writing. He has not only been my supervisor in this PhD journey, but he has been working with me on several other research projects, which give me the comfort that every child should have when they are looking for someone to hang on. Professor, I want to say that your new accolade is just the start of greater things to come. I want to thank the Reverend Sisters, Sister Cecilia, and the Mother Superior here in Buea. I want to thank family. I want to thank Bandwe. I wouldn't end without mentioning the presence of the board chair of the Cape County Excellence Fund, Mr. George Wenka, who has shown that the fund is not only awarding students, but the fund is meaningfully and rightfully so equitably setting a benchmark for inclusion. It is not every day that, Mr. Chair, that you will drive from Douala to here to attend a PhD thesis. The regional delegate for social affairs who have been here, all those from the civil society spaces, I want to commend you for standing by me throughout this rocky path. But to build going forward on the words of the Dean that the journey has only begun. And Mr. Chair, distinguished academics, I would always come back for directions because, like Archbishop Desmond Tutu put it, if you are neutral in injustice, you've taken the side of the oppressor. And so it would be ingratitude for me to then derail on the path that you have set for me. I commit to stay on this lane and to improve not only the output of trainees from the Department of International Relations and Conflict Resolution, but the faculty and inclusion generally. Thank you very much.
Everybody is at the engineering mental faculty. The very transcribe the scripts, exam script of disabled visually impaired children. And through his advocacy, because he gave the advocacy right in my office, he talks to me, he gave you he said a few months, he led me the speech delivery. Talking more than the chair. He came to my office, I told him I give just 1 minute. He said yes. And I've just come for 15 seconds. There is a stay there for 1 minute. His advocacy was very powerful. And because of him, the faculty decided that we are going to see how we are going to squeeze our budget to get some specialized machines for the physical usually so they can write their exams in all platforms, like all other students. So it's time to listen. On that note, the time has come. This is our own core moment. It's not our life block moment, it's our own moment. We decide their fate. So we would politely ask the audience to participate. PhD thesis in the Department of International Relations and Conflict Resolution, Faculty of Law and Political Science of this university, on the topic Accessing Mass Media During Conflict, Needs and Challenges of Persons with Visual Impairment in the Cameroon Anglophone Conflict. This thesis was prepared under the supervision of Professors Defu and Sunjo. This work has been defended before this panel, comprising myself and the other members who were introduced at the start of this exercise. In view of the regulations in force in this university, the conduct of the exercise was duly followed, and after having exchanges with you discussions with you on the topic first mentioned, to vet knowledgeability, that is the substance of the work, and the ownership of the work. This panel has deliberated and unanimously decided as follows. That the candidate has worked on a groundbreaking topic and has used the state-of-the-art literature and methodology to come up with sustained analysis. These parameters comfortably drive the focus of the work. The work is therefore a definite contribution to existing research in disability rights. On this basis, the jury again has unanimously decided to accept this work for the award of a PhD in international in conflict resolution. Thank you. In Faculty of Laws and Political Science. And the Dean, representing his jury and the faculty, will make the same submission before the end of semester Senate, which will be holding in less than a month. Congratulations, Dr. Kesah Princely. Attend conferences and talks. The same ability.
Gathered us here, for his parents and friends, for his professors, and all those who have helped him to become who he is today. We thank you, God, for all of them. We ask you to bless them, fill them with the knowledge, with the wisdom they need, so that as they continue to help the young people, you may bless them with all the wisdom. We thank you for those who have prepared the food for us, which we are going to share. Bless their resources and bless us as we eat this food to have the energy to do your will. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
When after Dr. Kesah was given the opportunity to say a last word, I may just perhaps reiterate that he's an example of, Dr. Kesah is an example of brilliance. He's an example of humility. He's an example of focus. He's an example of sense of belonging. He mentioned inclusion, that I introduced an inclusive policy. Of course, when I was appointed Dean of the Faculty, the theme of my office I chose at the time, and which is inclusiveness and what was that? Inclusiveness and yes. And so he was just echoing what is. I may be talking here perhaps as now as a member of the family. I don't know. I don't know what the representative of the family is going to say, because what I'm going to say here is something that touched me during the defense. When I asked Kesah this question, why did you dedicate this work to your grandmother? His response made all of us to be very emotional. To be honest, I will confess to you, my eyes were teary. My voice almost changed, but I just managed to compose myself. When I turned around and looked at Professor Ndefu already had teary eyes. He was actually wiping his eyes.
Yeah, right, Prof.
You see, but I think I was inspired by the Holy Spirit to ask that question, if I may be permitted to say that. And the revelation was so touching that we couldn't help but congratulate, as a last resort, to have our own peace, the sisters, the honorable sisters who took this initiative to build this young man. And as I said, if the sisters could do that, it's because the grandmother was the link. So, all I have to say is that I want to thank the sisters. I'm not talking like on behalf of the family, but I find myself talking as someone who is talking on behalf of the family. I want to thank the sisters for this wonderful job, because they have given us a product which we are going to be proud of. If I am saying so, I'm not talking out of any benefit. Kesah is a kingpin. In his situation, you'll be able to move mountains. Perhaps I will not be there to see it or to experience it, but I can see a legacy in the making. And as I said, the foundation of that legacy is those sisters who were moved to approach this family, Kesah's family, to pick him, to fish him out, so that he can, the star in him could blossom. I wish him all the best. We wish him all the best. In our office, just before we left, we have been commenting on his, even the external examiner is still very bemused with his performance. And it is rare. It is rare. Even those of us colleagues on the spot, Even Prof. Nefu, his supervisor, seems to be flabbergasted at his candidate's intelligence, his brightness. I just want to say he's a blessed young man. Let him share his blessings across. God has blessed him. Let him use that blessing to bless others. Let him bless his own community. Thank you, sisters. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, fellow students and Kesah's peers, for giving him the encouragement, pushing him in one way or the other. He may not be able to acknowledge all of you, but I think from the young man's deepest innermost self, he has appreciated you in his spirit, and that's what counts. Words sometimes cannot express what is in the heart. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm sorry for talking too long like Dr. Kesah.
Almost every other moderation was as boring as it could be, as academics are known to be. But the moment he stepped onto the stage, we felt we were listening to a comedic version of our father. You're as funny as you can be and as serious as you can be, and we are glad to have you mentor and lead us all the way. The academic Trevor Noah of Cameroon. Thank you for what you do. At this point, we're going to hear from Dr. Kesah preferred to call them his fathers. Whether fathers by adoption, fathers by birth, or fathers by some other biologically engineered process that is yet to be scientifically discovered, we do not know. But we're going to be hearing from those fathers now. And the first of those supervisors to speak will be Professor John Defru, someone whose works we've read and enjoyed so much. I was told way before I came to the university, Prof, that people who are not in the Department of Public Administration attend your lectures, and I don't know why. Maybe we'll find out when you get to speak now.
I want to tell all of us here present that the PhD is a very tedious program. Most so for somebody of his challenge. Very tedious. When you have 5 seminars, besides passing your coursework, first semester about 10 courses, second semester about 10 courses, then you enter into seminars, 5 seminars for a situation. And you must go through all those 5 seminars where you have professors in the panel to examine him, scrutinize his work. And he performed exceptionally very well. In all the seminars, the panels were very pleased about his performance. So no little wonder today, we are all amazed at the extra performance he did today. I want to say that, continue that brilliance, hard work. We are behind you. The Reverend Sisters are here and they continue to pray for you. I want to thank the Reverend Sisters for what they have done. I appreciate them, their family, for what they have done for you. And as the Dean said, you are a light of the world. You epitomize discipline. You are an embodiment of hard work. And we all appreciate. And we hope others of similar situations and challenges will epitomize that hard work and discipline in you, also perform well, just as you have done.
I would like to say that, very briefly, Kesah is more than an academic son for me, someone I've supervised since his master's dissertation to the PhD, and I would like to convey the heartfelt thoughts of another mentor that I work with to mentor Kesah and other young people, Professor Lynn Cockburn, a Canadian-based researcher. She's worked with me very closely to mentor Kesah and other young people, and she's elated. She's so proud. She's like a happy mother this afternoon. I'm just talking with her, and she says that I should greet everyone here and to convey her heartfelt gratitude. So Kesah, Prof. Lin says I should say hi to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So we work with them in a research group, and they've presented their research findings in seminars across the world. And Kesah, the PhD is just the start. Your research career only begins now. So you have a license to now practice as a full researcher. And I have no doubt that you will make us proud. During the defense, the dean did acknowledge that you were the second person with visual impairment to have defended a PhD in UB. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the first person to have defended a PhD in UB with visual impairment, Professor Charlie Nyogab, who is sat here with us in the Department of Special Education. He's worked very closely over the years with Dr. Kesah. I'm very aware of that. And he's somebody that is a trailblazer. Thank you very much, Professor Charlie. Not to say much, we've already spoken too much. I want to thank everyone for coming, and I hope that we can continue to accompany this young man through his career. Thank you very much.
I stand here as a representative of the family of Dr. Kesah. We are very, very grateful to have had this opportunity that in our family we have somebody with a PhD, and this person is no other person than Dr. Kesah. So we are very, very proud, despite the socio-political situation that we have in the Northwest region. You can see for yourself that some of us, the members of the family, we have endeavored to be here among you people. So we want to thank the administration, the University of Buea, for taking care of our son. And particular thanks goes to friends who have guided him throughout his studies, because it has not been easy on him because of his impairment. And for those who have contributed in one way or the other to let his educational career go, I want to say thanks to them, and that the Lord Almighty is going to replenish whatever they have removed from their various pockets. I want to thank again particularly the Reverend Sisters who have put a lot of effort to make the amount of years that Dr. Kesah has spent in the university to go through successfully. I want to say that as he has gone through this academic trial and has gone out successfully, that will not be the end. He has to continue severely to see that in the nearest future he's going to lead others to be like him, to also work more severely more than he did. So I want to say that as the years are going by, they should keep on trying to encourage people with impairments that they should follow educational career severely, because education is the key to success. So I want to stand by this, that those of us that are here with us, we should encourage everybody to be educated. We shouldn't say that because somebody is having an impairment, he's not able to go to school. I think the doctor's example proves for himself that we should endeavor and encourage everybody who wants to study. So by this, we are thanking you so much that for all the effort that you have put and for all the expenditures that you have also put in place. God will replenish, and God is going to lead us back very safely to all our directions that we have come from. So I want to say thanks once more and safe journey to all of you. Good evening and good appetite.
Salanga mulema mwami Uusate belubai Balamiko sontane mongele mam Mutukawa Abengwa motondobe Mutukawa Abengwa motondobe Na asiba kwe misobulu ukate jongele ndolango na asima kwese misobulu